Hope is some hidden dependency that you chose to not estimate risk on. Hope is nothing but fear and with nice emotions. Code is no longer effectively the source of truth. Programming languages at all will go away because there's no need for human to even understand.
Ruslan Belkin is the head of platform engineering at Inflection AI, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Jelled.AI. He's previously served as CTO of Norto and held senior engineering leadership roles at X, LinkedIn, Salesforce, and Netscape, shaping major data and machine learning platforms across Silicon Valley.
It's very easy to say, oh, those both things are important. And they may be both important, but they're not equivalently important.
Stacked rank priorities. So you introduced it. Are you still using stacked rank priorities?
If you do not
Today's guest is Ruslan Belkin, head of platform engineering at Inflection AI and a seasoned Silicon Valley engineering leader. Over the past 3 decades, Ruslan has built and scaled teams at companies like LinkedIn, Twitter, Salesforce, MetaMind, and Norto, where he pushed automation to a near total scale. Most recently, he founded Jelled.AI, which was acquired by Inflection AI in late 2024. Ruslan brings a rare mix of deep technical vigor, systems thinking, and philosophical clarity. Lately, he's been challenging a core assumption in modern engineering, that code is still the center of gravity. As he puts it when reviewing plans that rely on optimism rather than truth, there's too much hope in that equation. Ruslan, welcome.
Thank you, Franz. Thank you for the kind introduction. And indeed, I made that tweet casually about too much hope in that equation, and it went viral. So that did happen.
To kind of learn a little bit more about that thought that blew up, one of the things you're famous for is that phrase, too much hope in that equation. But you've also written that it took years of failure before you developed emotional balance as a leader. So his question is like, was there a moment, a specific project or a situation where you realized that you had too much hope in your own equation?
To be honest, there wasn't. There have been multiple instances where it did happen, probably countless instances, and it was an iterative process. And I was starting to think about what it meant. First of all, it was just an observation, looking at how we run projects, how product organization operated, that, sometimes people make a decision and, said things were not sorted out properly. So there was this blind hope that it'll work somehow. And at some point, sometimes it did. But then I started to think about it. It's like, why do we need to do it that way, right? Because what's hope? Hope is some hidden dependency that you chose to not estimate risk on. You basically said, okay, well, I hope it all works out. And it's okay to hope it works out if you have a clear understanding what the risk reward is. But if it's not, then it's just hope. And it's just a flip side of fear. Fear is like when you're afraid that bad's gonna go on. Hope you kind of fear that, against all odds it might work out. So it's basically the same flip coin of it. So you want neutral, right? You want to understand your dependency, even if it's a low probability. You want to get the best view on the problem that you have, and then you move on from there. Typical example would be in estimation. As you know, in software engineering in the past, we used to say that everything takes 2 weeks. That's before AI, right?
Yeah.
Every project would take 2 weeks. That's a normal estimate. But what people would do, they would project something, and they will project something very casually. Nobody actually bothered to go and say, okay, let's actually try to plan it out and see how it may work out, because people were simply afraid to find out that instead of 3 months, it'll take 6 months. I have to go tell the CEO that it's going to take 6 months. So that's where the hope into the equation came most frequently into that equation. I was guilty of that myself too. So sometimes you roll the ball knowing the risk is high, but you kind of didn't bother to fully estimate it, and that backfired several times. So yeah, there's some learning there.
I mean, I guess I guess part of it is having to realize that you are putting hope in it, because I feel like sometimes it comes reaction wise, right? You instantly think of it without thinking that this is hope. It's just you believe it's going to work without thinking a little bit deeper about what the actual problem is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's a flip coin of fear. Hope is nothing but fear, and with nice emotions around it. It's all it is.
Yeah. So I would say, and it's funny. So you mentioned that casually, and then it just took off and gained steam. So it's not actually something that's super core to your beliefs. Is that Is that accurate?
No, it was just an observation, and lots of people seem to have agreed with that observation because that's true. We all know that lots of things are done, especially the bigger the company, the more things are done by the seat of the pants. So it's very hard to raise money as a startup without at least a good pitch. And you basically say, okay, why now? Why this team? What's the category? How are we going to scale? All the standard questions you'd have to answer in a fundraising pitch, right? In a big company, that's much less rigor going on. It's basically like, let's do this project because XYZ, because so and so said, or because we have this, idea. And that lack of rigor actually puts too much hope in that equation. Imagine like 95% of the companies fail with a reasonable fundraising pitch. Now, like 99% of other projects in big companies fail because it's not even been receiving that type of scrutiny, or just even a minimal scrutiny.
Yeah, it's only they kind of lose sight of what got them there in the first place a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the normal questions, and you'll never fund the company without kind of asking these 4 basic questions I just outlined.
Yeah.
Right. But how many projects get greenlighted in a bigger company with none of these questions being asked at all?
Absolutely. So now at Inflection, you're using more of a model first team leadership, right? Lead with the spec is kind of what you're leaning into, right? So could you explain a little bit about what that means in the day-to-day operations, right? Like how you're leading with the spec. How does that affect your team?
Yeah, so there are 2 things that transpired. I don't think it's unique to Inflection. It's as a result of the advances in model development where we can generate code right now. I think the whole equation of software development flipped, right? In the past, what was the spec? Some product manager writes a spec, you kind of look at it, you implement a heavy pass, and then spec gets forgotten because it's really never been a source of truth. Code was always the source of truth, right? And there was that saying, "Code never lies," and all of these things, right, in software engineering dogma of the prior generation. But now it's no longer the case. Now, actually, you compile code from a spec. Now it's more nuanced a little bit, but you do compile code from a spec using Cloud Code or Codex, or whatever your favorite coding tool is, and then you iterate over it, and then you obviously hopefully need to have test and evaluations around it, and that becomes your source of truth. So code is no longer effectively the source of truth. It actually does not matter. My prediction, if you ask me, like Ruslan Nostradamus, what's going to happen to software engineering in 5 years, and said, actually, programming languages at all will go away because there's no need for human to even understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, which will kind of put the whole thing up on its head. I mean, I don't know what that world will look like. It certainly will not look like today, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, specs becomes a source of truth. You need to apply a lot more rigor to it. You need to version it in GitHub just like you used to do with code. You need to build evaluations, simulation suites, and test suites around it to make sure that you're getting the behavior you're expecting, because ultimately you still need to judge the outcome. So the judging of the outcome becomes even more important because that's your only reference point, whether it's from customers or from tests or from human evaluations, right? Or from simulations. So that's, I think it's not unique to us. I think it inverted the entire equation and seemed to be accelerating. Yes, you do still need to understand how software is built. So I'm not saying anybody can necessarily do that with high quality. And that's a good news, because for old salty dogs like myself, I can now be much more useful because at least I build a lot of systems. So I understand how architecture works and how to correctly prompt these systems to build the right thing and how to evaluate them. But yes, it's completely changed the way we do software development, and the way we need to approach product development.
Do you think that changes what the skills necessary for someone starting out in the field are?
Absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I think everybody becomes more of a product manager. So you have to start looking backwards from the end outcome. You need to get extremely good evaluating outcome and automating that evaluation, understanding what matters in evaluations, because that's your source of truth. You also still need to understand how basic computer science and how systems are built, because you will not be able to prompt the model correctly. And finally, you may not be able to apply it in every day, but just like you need to know multiplication table in school, although you're never going to use it again, you still probably need to know how the basics of the software work so you can intelligently judge and guide the model, at least today. How it will change tomorrow it's hard to tell, but I think it will come from the end result. Ultimately, if you think about, let me give you maybe an analogy. How these coding models are built, right? It's literally a reinforcement learning loop that takes into account your prompts as well as the physical environment that you're operating. So you're basically literally simulating an environment. You're running the piece of software. It does something. You're evaluating a piece of software either automatically most of the time, like it passed or fail. There's judge models, and then you continue training the model on that what's called a verifiable reward, right? So that's how Claude trains its models, how OpenAI trains their models, DeepSeek trains their models, right? So that's the same kind of, think of the same loop, except apply it more broadly.
So in the next 24 months of AI, I know you said 5 years out, who knows? Is there anything that is sure in your mind other than uncertainty?
No, I didn't. The trend is clear, right? The trend is clear in several directions, right? The concept of copilot will go away. There will be no such thing. There will be mostly pilots, and systems will ask you, okay, what's the next right step? So it will be much more proactive. I think you will need to start paying more attention to human interactions because ultimately these models interact with humans. That creates a lot of anxiety, that creates a lot of pushback in the organizations. People, may react because they may lose their jobs. So you do need to pay attention to human aspect of artificial intelligence. And I think that exponential advancements will continue to the point where, software will be completely written. It will be basically by models. Lots of other types of automations will be written by models. And I think it will expand into more of a real world, right? There will be more and more video. There will be more and more like real world physical models out there. But I think the human component will still be important in terms of integration and evaluation. And I think more and more effort will be shifting towards how do you build trusted agents? How do you build agents that actually you can rely on and be confident? And it's the same problem with self-driving. It's essentially I don't know if you heard Andrei Karpathy talking about the Martian Nines on his podcast, but it's like every 9 of reliability, I think there will be a slog just like in self-driving. So because it's not okay to have a car that, has 90%, does 90% okay, and the rest 10%, you wouldn't drive such a car, right? So the same thing will going to start to happen across other industries, and it will be somewhat a slog. It will slow down a little bit, and because you need to be able to achieve that reliability, but it'll move from just coding it into other areas. So that trend will continue. Now, there's several things that are unresolved. That said, architecturally, I think they still don't have a good sense how to do memory correctly. Still have issues in terms of continuous learning. These are all active areas of research. Personalization is still problematic because you think about it. Ideally, your brain kind of is your brain, right? It's not shared brain between you and Franz, right? But now we're talking to ChatGPT model, it's essentially a shared brain with some kind of memory augmentation, which means there's all a cost. So the cost problem is not solved, right? You basically need to burn a lot of tokens to do these things. So there's a bunch of problems, but they feel tractable. I think to me, it feels, okay, well, we can understand that we have a problem. There's some not good solutions right now to some of them, but within next time frame, it'll get better and better.
Yeah, I've heard from both sides, right? There's some people that are like, in 5 years, no one will be employed. AI will have taken over everything. And then I talk to other folks, and they're of the opinion that, well, everyone's going to be coding to a certain degree because it's becoming easier, right? So maybe product people are going to turn out to where they're, using these tools. And so there's going to actually be more opportunity, and there's still going to be a shortage of talent.
Yeah, I am not a doomer here. I think when you have a robot in a house to fold the laundry, you would want it to fold the laundry the way your grandmother folded the laundry, right?
Yeah.
So, and that will require sort of some work. So there will be a lot more use cases that we now just don't see, right? And they will appear, and it will require human input, human ingenuity, networking of these components together in a more finessed way, right? Than it is done today. New interfaces, right? Transmission speed of information. And I'm not saying everybody's going to walk around with Neuralink implants, but it could increase bandwidth potentially.
Yeah, I mean, increases bandwidth, and also, I guess, it opens up the door for people that aren't technical to be able to do things that I feel like it's like YouTube, right? The democratization of content creation.
And democratization even of capacity of human brain, right? If you think about it, because some people have some skills, some people have other skills, we just don't know how to properly apply them. And I think that will level the playing field in similar way that you bring up YouTube analogy, right? It leveled the playing field. Before, only Hollywood people could do these things, right?
Now people with absolutely no talent can put video out there.
In fact, maybe the less talent you have, the more viral it's going to go.
Exactly. That's what seems to hit, yeah, I have a 6-year-old, and I've gotten to the point now where the app is either locked with a code or it's deleted from the device because it's all he wants to watch. And I'm like, I just don't understand. But anyways, I digress.
As we're talking about this kind of uncertainty around the future and, and what might or might not happen and how we can't predict, like how do you hire for problems that you can't really define? Like, what questions, I guess, do you ask, or how do you find someone that can actually work in ambiguity and be prepared to change as the times do?
Yeah, so hiring is an interesting optimization problem. Actually, it's a very difficult one because you have several constraints. One constraint is you may not be OpenAI where everybody applies, right? And you will be able to outbid anybody like Google, right? In terms of money. So you have that constraint, right? You also have constraint of time. Let's say you're a startup, you just raised money. Obviously, you can't sit around. So you have to hire somebody in a time frame. Big company as well. You may have a hiring freeze next month. Who knows, right? So you have a time constraint, and now you have a pool of candidates that you're trying to select from. So I'd approach this, let's say, pick a middle case where you can pay, but not potentially competitively relative to Google, and you always have a clock. So you'd basically say, okay, well, can I find a candidate that is not perfect in some way, because I can get a perfect candidate on the resume that will accept the position. And then I will look, okay, what's special about that candidate? Was there an adversity? So I'm looking for past adversities in life. Like what challenges were overcome, right? What adversities were maybe not even overcome, but dealt with, right?
When you say adversities, do you mean ones that are only focused in work or just life in general?
Of work and life, right? It could have been even a situation where somebody had a bad manager, somebody had a bad work situation and it didn't work out. It's still a learning experience. You just have to be intelligent enough to dig deeper into it, right? And to see, okay, what were the adversities? How did person handle it? What did person learn from it? Right? And then you also ask questions about to understand people's tolerance for risk and for managing uncertainty, right? And that is easy. That you can say. You just ask a question. How would you that a problem that's not ill-defined? Let's say, how do we improve emotional intelligence of our chatbot? Now, what's emotional intelligence? What it is now? How do we improve it? How do we think about this? You ask these type of open-ended questions, and it becomes clear that there's a lot of uncertainty that need to be managed. Or you can say, okay, well, new manager, you need to take a team of 45 people, and everybody's saying that they have a million features to work on. Everything is too slow. We are behind the schedule by 12 months. By basically, the situation is hopeless. How do you deal with it? All right. So that's an example.
So once you get someone, right, and they've passed these tests, they've joined your team. I know a lot of people that's worked with you in the past, they'd said that you practice complete ownership, right? Singular accountability. So how do you bring that to a team, right? Where everyone's working together, someone's jumping in here, someone's jumping in there, paths are crossing, right? So how do you distill that down, not only to yourself and how you practice it personally, but, hold other people accountable to that same standard?
So first of all, I think you as a leader, you have to have a vision, right? And I'm not saying it's even you have to be a correct vision, but you have to have a believable past. You have to imagine the future. And it took me actually a while to understand that, right? Before I was a big fan of like experiment and try things and see what works. And I kind of departed from that idea because it can work. I'm not saying it cannot work. I kind of came back towards like Yogananda's in Elon Musk worldview to say that if your vision is strong enough and you have enough smart people thinking about it, the way to the promised land is to compel the world by applying that focused vision, right? So it's not about finding the product market fit, it's about compelling the world to your vision. So it's a different way to think about product development. So you do need to have vision. You have to be able to articulate it. You have to be able to defend it. You have to be able to improve it over time. You also need to be not confusing where it came from, because lots of people, I know, Rene Girard's mimetic theory, but we are imitators, right? We tend to parrot other people. And it's very easy to pick up somebody else's thought without even consciously thinking about it and think it's yours, but then it's not yours. So, and that you will not be able to be a good carrier of it. So vision needs to be aligned and focused vision. Yes, you cannot diffuse responsibility. If somebody is on a hook, that person is on a hook. Because as soon as you diffuse responsibility, nobody is accountable. You also need to stand behind your people, because if you ask somebody to do a high risk task and it's a 50% probability of failure, if there is any blame assigned after that, even if not by you, by some other people, and you don't stop it, then you'll never be able to do that again. Right. So nobody's going to do that. And finally, I think there's also a danger of, where conflicts come into play most of the time in the organization. There's lots of politics and other things, but majority of conflicts in my experience are from insufficient scrutiny, insufficient transparency, and insufficient scrutiny. So when decisions are made without stress testing them, right? And so other people feel like they were not heard, or they were not heard and that wasn't stress tested enough. So there wasn't a clear understanding of risk reward. And I think you have to work towards having that clear understanding of risk reward. And what gets in the way sometimes is like old friendships, right? People like, yeah, I know that, but we worked together for a long time and I trust that person, and it's too much hope in that equation, right? So
Yes.
that's where it comes down to. And then other people see that it's like, okay, well, actually you didn't stress test that problem. You basically, because you you have some bias ahead of time, that's why you went that way, and then it destroys the culture of the company, right? So you have to
Yep.
be very clear as to how you make decisions. Maybe minority of people who would completely vehemently disagree with that path on merits, and they don't want to take that risk, and that's maybe okay. You should go do something else. But in general, that's this very minority. I've seen it. It rarely happens if you do the right process here.
The right process. How do you create a team culture where constructive conflict is normal and people are able to communicate unemotionally like this?
Oh, people can communicate emotionally. I mean, you have to be able. Sometimes things do get emotional, and you just need to look past that.
Well, I mean, when I say emotional, I mean more focused on the hope and fear.
I think you have to ask the right questions. Just like I still come back to the startup funding model. You ask the same questions, as you essentially put everybody in the position of an investor and say, okay, these are questions I'm going to ask, and I'm going to evaluate that on these merits, and then we can disagree on whether you want to take that risk or not. That may be a genuine disagreement, but we should not disagree on facts and how much risk is there, and what decisions we're making. Constructive conflict always exists, so you don't need to go create it. I mean, it'll exist. In my experience, if any high performing organization, the conflict will exist naturally. It just the trick is how do you make it constructive? How do you make people trust you? And that I think comes only through these stress testing elements. And now with AI, it's much easier to do. Before you had to potentially go and do some research and look at competitors. Now you can just simply ask ChatGPT to do that for you. So it's actually a quicker process.
Yeah, and I would imagine that helps you kind of build loyalty within your teams, right? Once everyone understands that this is the bar, this is how we operate, they see you doing it that way.
Yeah. On that note, I learned that it's not my invention. I learned it from Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn. He used to say, and that phrase somehow stuck with me. He used to say, "Trust is consistency over time."
Yeah.
Think about it.
I love it. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Well, could you touch briefly on stacked rank priorities? I guess first, so you introduced it at Nado. Are you still using stacked rank priorities?
Yeah, I always use stack rank. Yeah, I use stack rank priorities for everything,
Yes.
including people.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So reason is it just disciplines your mind, right? If you do not, it's very easy to say, oh, those both two things are important. And they may be both important, but they're not equivalently important. You have to know which one to drop, right? So operating, it just disciplines everything. And it's also much quicker when you discover that you're wrong in your stack rank. It's much easier to pivot because it's very obvious when you're wrong. Because you basically applying your best resources to your most important priority in the stack rank order. And if it goes the wrong way, the outcome is very clear very quickly. As an opposite, when you peanut butter it, right, and it can last for a long time, where it's like minimal progress everywhere, but overall there's some kind of progress.
And is that something, when you come up with these priorities, is that something you're doing as a team, or you take a first stab at it and you ask for feedback? How do you really like define?
I mean, logistically, you'd always review them. Like at every meeting, you'd say, here's our priorities.
Yep.
It can change, but here's our priorities. There shouldn't be no ambiguity. If I'm not there, anybody next should know what the priority is.
Yep.
There should be absolutely zero ambiguity what the priority is. It's actually very hard to execute. And I've seen so many organizations that try to peanut butter things for strange reasons. It's a very simple model to execute. It's just very difficult model to execute mentally for some people.
I guess, and to keep at all the time. I know I have issues with stank wreck priorities.
Yeah.
You've said that humans are bad at processes. So what do you kind of look to automate versus keeping intentionally human in these kind of...
Yeah, there's a story about it. So at LinkedIn a long time ago, at the time, I think Scrum was very popular, or became very popular for some reason, like a Scrum, the software development methodology. Right? And I had several teams, and one of the teams was an ex-director of engineering from Yahoo who was big on Scrum. He even brought Scrum consultant and tried to sort of like institute Scrum. And I said, okay, fine, do it. So I had an A/B test. I literally had teams with doing Scrum, teams with not doing Scrum, teams doing something else, and teams that had more process will always underperformed, like a clockwork. And I've seen it in other companies as well after that. I was like, why is that? And I think it's human nature. People tend to always substitute work for outcome, right? So it's very easy to create a bunch of tickets, whether it's linear tickets, or Jira tickets, or Asana tickets, and say, oh, we've done all that work. Did it matter? Maybe not. But it's probably not. Plus, you probably spent 20-30% of extra time managing all that overhead for no good reason, right? So humans just are not good at it, right? So now with advent of AI, I mean, that's all automatable very easily, because these processes were designed to essentially make humans into a machine. Essentially, if you think about it, what's the purpose?
Yep.
Assigning you a Jira ticket and then tracking the status, but that isn't necessary. So you have to question in general, like I'm always skeptical on process, because the thing is, the more process you introduce, the more overhead you introduce. And some process is necessary, but not so much as being prophetized, I think. And thankfully it's going to go away with all the advancements in model development. All of that stuff's going to go away. Well, somebody will keep track of it, but it's not me. It'll be in the model context somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never thought about it though. That it's basically designed to make humans robots. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just substituting work for the outcome. I mean, if you think about, just go back and think of any old company. We fixed 150 Jira tickets last week or whatever. So what?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So we done a lot of work, and we also paid it less and a bunch of fees.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spent a ton of time managing this.
Yeah.
Not really
And you
sure
have a
that
project
anything's-
manager full time.
Yeah.
That is managing that. So if you count all that up, I'm not sure it works out.
Yeah. So to that end, do you have when you're building a team, building a company, it sounds like, lean is better. So following these different processes that you put in place, does that allow you to accomplish more with less as far as the people go?
Yeah, you always try to do that, right? So you try to not do things that people are not good at, and do things that people are good at. Yeah. So the less, I would start with zero process in general, and sometimes you need some process. But you should look at it as set of tools. You have a bunch of tools in the tool shed, just like you have management tools, you have other tools, and you use tools when you're necessary. When you need to use them, you put them away when you don't need to use them. You just be dispassionate about it. There's a lot of, unfortunately, in software, there's a lot of religion about this stuff, and I am absolutely non-religious here. These are just tools, and there's always better tools, and sometimes not so good tools, and you just use them when you need to use them.
Makes sense.
But generally, you gotta keep an eye on the outcome. Just make sure that work never, exceeds the outcome, right? That's a bad equation.
Like when you're bringing on new folks to your team, do you find that they struggle with that? If you're just like, hey, we're going to go no process here, and then they probably come from somewhere and their training and their background, or maybe you're hiring, you're kind of weeding that out in your interview process, but how do you get people on board with that if they're, they're used to rigorous processes being in place? And
Well, if they used to be managed like
yeah,
this, like robots, they're probably self-selecting out. People may have their own process. That people may have like a Google Doc or spreadsheet or linear, whatever they like to use personally, and I have no problem with that.
yep, okay,
Like as long as people manage themselves, and then team coalesces on some mechanics that are useful for people. Because it's also sometimes some people like some tools, some people don't like the other tools. But you don't want to get to. I don't know how many times you've seen this. I've seen it a lot of times. All these discussions as to which tool we should use.
yeah,
Right, that is highly unproductive,
yeah,
right? If you think about it, but there's a lot of calories being expended on this type of exercise. And in the past, I must admit, in the past, it was probably more necessary than it is now, because now with AI, I think things are just much easier.
yeah.
I wonder, as you're hiring, like aside from kind of, resume and stuff, what are kind of the core things that you're looking for in people that are, joining a team under you?
What I'm trying to get to is several questions. So typically my interview process, I would ask why people got into the software engineering in the first place. How did that happen? Like, was it in high school? Was it how? Why?
Yep.
Like, what's the reason? Then I'm trying to figure out what do people want ultimately to do, right? Most people don't know what they want to do in life. That's a hard question, right? But some people have some idea, and I would just want to understand this thinking towards that, right? Is it what's the ultimate goal? Do they want to start a company? Do they want a different type of career? Do they want to focus on science? I'm trying to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are in that regard. And then you build a team like a Lego puzzle, right? You're trying to have different skills, very diverse skills on the team, because otherwise you get into tunnel vision. So it's actually very dangerous to build a very kind of monolithically think team where there's no opinions. Nobody can challenge anybody,
Yeah.
right? So you're trying to build it as a Lego, right? But I'm trying to understand what's the core motivation. So you have to get to the core motivation of a person to understand it. And again, most people don't even know what they want, but maybe there's a way for them to discover that, or for me to help them discover that, and vice versa. And that creates a very gelled environment.
And it's like, helping them discover, I kind of want to go a little bit further on that. And I mean, like, once you've assembled the individuals that you want, do you have a process or something that you do to help them turn into a team rather than just a bunch of people that work near each other?
Well, I mean, obviously you have a vision of what you're trying to do. So you're all trying to, there's an outcome, right? So there's a unifying center as to why you're doing what you're doing. So why you're here, you're working towards a particular outcome. And, some people's timeframes may not match. Some people like have a shorter outcome, longer outcome, but overall it has to be aligned is what it is we are doing, right? It should be also enjoyable, right? If people don't enjoy coming to work every morning, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, right? It also has to be honest communication. If somebody has a problem, a family problem, or something like this, and there's an underperformance because of that, you need to know that underperformance because of that problem, and then you can be compassionate about it, or it's something else, right? So, and that type of communication helps helps build an army unit that you basically have each other's back, right? I mean, obviously, one of my reports had a phrase, which I think was tweeted at some point, is for the team to gel, it goes like this: for the team to gel, everybody must read the same propaganda. That's what's exact wording, right? And which means like, yeah, you do have to share a philosophy. That's why I think it's important to have, people read common blogs, common books, just have a worldview that a professional worldview that is calm, right?
Yeah. Doing that without creating an echo chamber, right?
Yeah, it easily create an echo chamber, but typically if you have enough pressure from the outside, meaning competitors, it's not so much of an echo chamber because there's the natural pressures like we need to deliver, right? Yeah, I can see why in a slower moving organizations where it can happen.
Yeah. You want to kind of transition to away from the team building and a little bit more about yourself. I know you practice Stoicism, and that's something that you're probably, you're living that and you're bringing that to your personal routine specifically. I did kind of went down the rabbit hole on your blog. which I was impressed by. And I think we could do a whole nother podcast on your the way you manage your personal routine. But as far as like Stoicism specifically, is there a way that you've seen that applied in your workplace with your teams, maybe, meeting with the board or whatnot, where you've held steadfast and you've seen it have a positive outcome in that situation or in multiple situations?
I came into Stoicism because I was not that good at emotional control, right? Just to be fair, so it was kind of necessity. And when I was looking for instruments here, I thought, well, it's very the Stoic philosophy is very similar to Buddhism without some of the religious stuff. And Romans actually, knew how to make money and and how to manage affairs. So that resonated with me, and it's very simple. So it's the simplicity that attracted me, right?
Yeah.
It's actually easy to apply. I mean, there's multiple tenets here. You have to practice it because it's easier said than done. Even when you practice it, you may be kicked off out of balance, and the question is how long you're gonna stay out of balance. It's like in martial arts. You're gonna get hit and you're gonna get dazzled. The question is for how many seconds, right? So you have to get back into functional game as quickly as possible, right? So that's the point. And yes, there's basic tenets like things within your control, things that without your control. Also understanding that what you can control is yourself, right? And you have to be happy with that first and foremost. Being able to see the world from a bigger picture standpoint, I think is very important. Being able to be resigned to potential failure, right? Meaning, what I mean to say is like samurai, right? The samurai's body is dead as far as the mind is concerned, and from there is just execution. So you have to be able to accept the failure up front. And this is very important because otherwise you'll be paralyzed by fear much quicker than you think, right? And then you act in a suboptimal way. And again, it's a journey. It's not something that there's no perfect Stoics, right? Even Seneca clearly had some flaws, right? But he tried, right?
That's right. It's the effort, ongoing effort.
Yeah, working for Emperor Nero was a difficult job, I must admit.
Yeah.
But
So your blog, right? We'd like to mention that the equation, very much about finding balance between effort, rep. You've mentioned hope and fear multiple times throughout. So I know you said this is all ongoing. What is the equation, right? Like, have you figured that out? Have you found the balance, or is it just something that's just going to go on forever?
I would say I'm in a better balance than I used to be.
Yeah.
All right. So I found a balance that I'm reasonably happy with. There's always improvement,
Yeah.
right? But I think I moved closer to the outer edge of performance where I think like it's reasonably optimized, and it works for me. And now that's what works for me.
Yeah.
Other people should, and my advice is not to copy. My advice is to like, okay, this is works for me. You should come up with your own system that helps you through trial and error, right?
Yep.
But but that's what you're always trying, right? You're trying to be neutral, right? You're trying to be unfazed.
Yes.
In your resolve.
That's right. The recommendation for people: borrow what you will, but come up with your own.
Borrow what you will, and the most important thing is there was that saying that they become leaders because they've relieved themselves from responsibility to explain their behavior to others, right? And it's maybe a harsh saying, but it was probably designed to. It's one of the Zen philosophers said that, or one of those people, right? Not an exact phrasing, but. And I think what design will say that, okay, well, you shouldn't really care as much what other people think, right? Because as soon as you start doing that, it moves you away from first principle thinking. Then you think, oh, okay, what that board member thinks, so this person thinks. It doesn't mean you should ignore it or not listen to feedback. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't be paralyzed by sort of somebody else's thoughts without bothering to do your own thinking. But that's a process. It's difficult. I'm not minimizing.
I think this is always a fun question, but I mean, like you've, developed all these new habits and learned and had all these amazing experiences. What would you today tell the 2006 version of you? What advice would you give yourself?
I wish we had the time travel technology. Or maybe we do, maybe simulation resets, and who knows if you follow that. I actually don't know it would be practical. I think you have to discover certain things on your own, and I wish I've taken more risks than I have taken. I think making faster decisions, I think, is probably most important. I'd say it's hard to kind of look back and say, oh, you should do X, Y, and Z, because you don't listen to your own advice, let alone somebody else's, let alone somebody else's from the future, right? So it's probably not very practical. But what practical is to say that just do more things, take more risks. The younger you are, you should take more risks. That's what I would say. I don't know if that's an answer, but
Yeah,
and everybody
that
will tell you, I'll
definitely
do
is an
X and do Y and do Z, and I don't know how useful that is.
Yeah.
I think try to figure your own path, work on the figuring your own path by trying.
I mean, I think that's good advice. You know, whether you're talking to yourself or anyone else for that matter.
Yeah, so the friend of mine does rock climbing, right? And he's super good at it. He can just like hang up one hand, eat sandwich with the other hand, and I'm terrible at it. So I can do a lot of pull-ups. I can do like 20 pull-ups straight, even at my age. But I'm terrible at rock climbing. It's like his name is Kaisheng. He's like, Kaisheng, so what do you do to be that good at rock climbing? He said, Ruslan, you know, to get good at rock climbing, you just need to do rock climbing.
Yeah.
All right. So that's my advice, right? To get good at it, just do it.
Yes, I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
make faster decisions.
Do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
The dog.
Who's that?
Ragu.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I told you this was gonna happen.
The dogs,
You know,
dogs
we were-
know.
we
I
were-
gotta trust the dog.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right,
Ragu.
we want Ragu. When you're finished, we got a couple more questions.
Okay.
All right. Well, without getting you in any trouble with your current team, best team you ever led, and what made them special?
You know, it's like grandmother loves both. 2 times, I think that I would probably the high points of my career. I'd say team at Twitter was excellent. All right, the search team at Twitter was excellent. Especially the fight was at a very exciting time for the company. The fight was very exciting. I think team at LinkedIn was excellent. Again, in the beginning, especially when now looking back, everybody knew, oh, that's going to become a big company, everything's going to work out. But at the time, it was not so clear. I can show you that. All right, and there's a lot of like late nights and overnights, and people trying to do their best. You know, it was probably like 2 points, I would say, that was the most gelled.
And I would imagine that a lot of that has to do just with the stage, right? What was at stake, and just kind of where you were at with the company.
I mean, you're affecting the world at that point. I mean, at Twitter at the time, I mean, I think that was the revolutions were happening.
Yeah.
We closed Pope's account because we thought it was a spam. No, the system did, obviously. So there was a lot of interesting stories you could tell.
From my own information, what I want to know more about the Pope's account that you closed. It was like a fake Pope?
Well, I mean, we had an anti-spam system, right? And the Pope's account typically wouldn't tweet much. And then he tweeted something, right? And, you know, the algorithm was so designed, well, you know, it flagged it as a spam, as a spam and blocked it, right? And of course, we get immediate, you know, attention to that matter, right? But look, I mean, looking back, obviously, the further back you look, more glamorous it looks. Just to be clear, I mean, it probably wasn't as glamorous at the time.
Excellent. Well, I would like to give you a moment, right? Listeners, they want to look you up. They want to find you. What's the best place to do that?
LinkedIn is the best place. Just my first name, last name. It's the first name that comes up. I think probably my name is still hard coded in one of there was a early file on LinkedIn with the hard coded handles.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if they removed it or not, but they used to be. So before it hits any search, it hits that file. Right, it's probably still there. I think that's probably the best place. I'll post on LinkedIn more often than anywhere else. Twitter or X handles are at Ruslan SV, so it's also there. I think that's and equationblog.com. I think that's where I occasionally, when I find time, I do post things. I do it when I think I have something to say. So.
Excellent. You have something that you think will help other people, you put it up there. So fantastic. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. I think the audience will find this very insightful, informative, and fun. I know I had a good time.
Likewise. Well, thank you, Franz, and thank you, Kyle, for making this happen. And I would love to come back at some point with more.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.